Good afternoon. I'm Tom Hansen. Pope Leo is back in Rome after wrapping up a very busy four-nation tour of Africa. The Pope's trip included visits to Algeria, Cameroon, and Angola. He spoke with reporters from his plane on his way back to Italy, and here's some of what he had to say.
The presence of a pope with any head of state can be interpreted in different ways. It can be interpreted and has been interpreted by some as, the Pope or the Church is saying it's okay that they live like that. And others may say things differently. I would go back to something I said in my initial remarks about the importance of understanding the primary purpose of the travel that I do, that the Pope does to visit the people, and of the great value that the system that the Holy See continues with at times great sacrifice to maintain diplomatic relations with countries throughout the world. And sometimes we have diplomatic relationships with countries that have authoritarian leaders. We have the opportunity to speak with them on a diplomatic level, on a formal level. We don't always make great proclamations criticizing, judging, or condemning, but there's an awful lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to promote justice, to promote humanitarian causes, to look for, at times, situations where there may be political prisoners and finding a way for them to be freed, situations of hunger, of sickness, etc. So the Holy See, by maintaining, if you will, a neutrality and looking for ways to continue our positive diplomatic relationship with so many different countries, we're actually trying to find a way to apply the gospel to concrete situations so that the lives of people can be improved. People will interpret the rest of it as they will, but I think it's important for us to look for the best way that we can to try and help the people of any given country.
Grazie Santità. La prossima domanda è di Verena Schalter della radio tedesca.
Holy Father, congratulations to your first papal trip to the global south. We saw a lot of enthusiasm and also, even euphoria. I can imagine that this was also for you very moving. I would like to know how you assess the decision of Cardinal Reinhard Marx, Archbishop from Munich and Freising, on the permission that he gave permission to the blessing of same-sex couples in his diocese. And in light of different cultural and theological perspectives, especially in Africa, how do you intend to preserve the unity of the global church on that particular matter?
First of all, I think it's very important to understand that the unity or division of the church should not revolve around sexual matters. We tend to think that when the church is talking about morality, that the only issue of morality is sexual. And in reality, I believe there are much greater and more important issues such as justice, equality, freedom of men and women, freedom of religion, that would all take priority before that particular issue. The Holy See has already spoken to the German bishops. The Holy See has made it clear that we do not agree with the formalized blessing of couples, in this case homosexual couples, as you ask, or couples in irregular situations, beyond what was specifically, if you will, allowed for by Pope Francis in saying all people receive blessings. When a priest gives a blessing at the end of Mass, when the Pope gives a blessing at the end of a large celebration like such we had today, there are blessings of all people. Francis's infamous, famous, well-known expression of tutti, tutti, tutti is an expression of the Church's belief that all are welcome, all are invited. All are invited to follow Jesus, and all are invited to look for conversion in their lives. To go beyond that today, I think that the topic can cause more disunity than unity, and that we should look for ways to build our unity upon Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ teaches. So that's how I would respond to that question.
Grazie Santità, grazie Verena. La prossima domanda è di Annelise Taggart di Newsmax.
Holy Father, thank you very much. You have spoken on this trip about how people hunger and thirst for justice. It was just reported this morning that Iran has executed yet another one of the members of the opposition. And this comes as it has been said that the regime has also publicly hanged multiple other people as well as murdered thousands of its own people. Do you condemn these actions, and do you have any message to the Iranian regime?
I condemn all actions that are unjust. I condemn the taking of people's lives. I condemn capital punishment. I believe that human life is to be respected and that all people from conception to natural birth, their lives should be respected and protected. So when a regime, when a country takes decisions which takes away the lives of other people unjustly, then obviously that is something that should be condemned.
Grazie, Santità. Grazie.
All right, CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay has been traveling with the Pope. He joins us now from Rome. Chris, thanks for coming on. So the Pope carried out a very ambitious itinerary, 4 nations in 11 days. Walk us through some of the highlights here, and also what's it like traveling with the Pope?
Hey, Tom. Well, yes, it was an extraordinary trip, both for the people he saw, the places that he visited, and, of course, this controversy with the Trump administration that was hanging over it virtually every step of the way. So it started in Algeria, then he went on to Cameroon. He spoke in a conflict zone in Cameroon, for instance. It's a separatist war that's taking place there that's killed thousands of people and displaced more than 500,000. From there, he went on to Angola. One of the highlights there was speaking at a shrine where priests once baptized slaves before those slaves were shipped off to the Americas. And then finally, he ended in Equatorial Guinea. It is a country that is very rich in oil wealth. Nevertheless, more than half of the population lives below the poverty line. So throughout this entire trip, a lot of his themes were things like peace, justice, addressing inequality, and reconciliation. And the scenes were incredible. I mean, we had people who were dancing underneath heavy rain when he would speak before these crowds of tens of thousands of people. Sometimes it was beneath the hot, beating African sun. So really just some of the most remarkable images that we've seen throughout the entire papacy. You asked what it's like to travel with the Pope. This is only the 3rd trip he's been on since Leo became Pope. This is also the longest trip that he's been on, and also the most uncharacteristic. I mean, really unprecedented in a lot of ways. First of all, because of this clash that he's had with the Trump administration that was simmering and then reached a boil on the very first day of the trip, but also by the way he conducted the trip. Traditionally, popes don't really engage with the press until the tail end on that flight back to Rome, and that's very intentional. Popes typically don't want anything that comes out of that press conference to distract or derail the trip and force people to stop paying attention to the mission of the Pope itself. This Pope is different. He chose to take on some of the criticisms he was getting from the Trump administration within hours of receiving those criticisms. They came on Truth Social, and then hours later, his plane took off, and he decided, I'm going to talk to the press about this right away.
You know, Chris, you talk about how unique this trip was. One of the things that made it so unique, the Pope was the first Pope to visit countries like Algeria. I just wonder about the itinerary here and the thoughts behind which countries he ended up visiting, because he skipped over some of those Catholic heavy hitters like Nigeria, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in order to make a visit at some other countries that are a little bit more off the beaten path. Do you know why they chose the countries they did?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned Democratic Republic of Congo. That's some place that Francis went to just a few years ago. So I think he wanted to go to some places that the Catholic Church hadn't been to, as you alluded to. So in Algeria, it is the place of death for Saint Augustine. He is one of the fathers of Catholicism. One of the things that he's known for instance, is this doctrine called just war doctrine, which also is something that got brought up during his visit because of the controversy swirling around him and the Trump administration, both of them at odds over the war in Iran. Vice President Vance bringing it up and, in fact, questioning the Pope's understanding of this doctrine, all of it being very timely and some would argue ironic, questioning the head of the Catholic Church and his understanding of this, especially when he had just visited the place of death of St. Augustine and happens to be a member of the Augustinian order. So that was one of the very poignant reasons for him choosing to go to Algeria and also to go to places just to put them on the map. I mean, very few people have even heard about Equatorial Guinea, let alone known what's going on in this country of, a little more than 1 million people, very rich in oil wealth. But, groups like the World Bank point out the fact that it still has a long way to go in terms of economic equality, despite its vast oil wealth. There is also widespread criticism in the international community about its track record when it comes to political prisoners. In fact, Pope Leo visited a prison, and it was one of the most poignant stops in his trip. The visuals are pretty stunning. It was pouring rain, and these prisoners were out there dancing to greet him. So the Catholic Church, and Pope Leo in particular, had to emphasize again and again that the reason of this trip, first and foremost, was to bring a message of peace, to preach the gospel. Blessed are the peacemakers is a quote that he repeated again and again. He wants to bring that message of peace to Africa, first and foremost, when he's in Africa, not preach it to the White House. But of course, due to the timing of this clash with the Trump administration, a lot of his words took on a whole new meaning, and many started to interpret his words as though they were aimed at the Trump administration. So, for instance, when he was in Cameroon, one of the most pointed phrases that he made was when he said that the world is being ravaged by a handful of tyrants. Now, this was in a country that is currently enduring a separatist war. And so he had to come back later and say, I was talking about Africa, not the Trump administration. In fact, he made 3 separate appearances on the papal plane before the press. That's the first time I've ever seen that. The first one, of course, was to say that he wasn't afraid of the Trump administration, which was really what brought this clash to the public. And then the second time was almost a week later to say, I'm not here to debate the Trump administration. My message of peace is first and foremost for Africa, not the Trump administration.
Yeah, certainly a lot of ground covered, both figuratively and literally, in this trip. Chris Livesay, thank you for breaking it all down for us.